I'm so excited to tell you about Inclusive Neuroverse, a clothing line started by an amazing 7-year-old boy who has autism and ADHD. Their mission? To promote autism acceptance through unique designs overflowing with love. Each piece celebrates neurodiversity and spreads awareness in style. Join the movement today and show your support for understanding and inclusivity. Visit inclusiveneuroverse.com now and make sure you use code QUIETConnection, all one word, all uppercase, at checkout for a 15% discount. Welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. In today's episode, I'm connecting with Sarah, co-founder of Mom's Mental Health Initiative. She shares her personal experiences with PMADS and how physically and mentally debilitating they were. She also discusses how MMHI was born from a storm and the ways in which it is supporting birthing people in their own mental health storms. Here's Sarah. Hello! Today I'm here with Sarah. Sarah, how are you?
I am well today. Thank you.
Well, I think is a good term. I like that better than I'm good or I'm great. It's a little more, it feels a little more accurate. Sarah, I would love it if you could sort of introduce yourself to my listeners and also let me know who you were before you were a mom.
Well, my name is Sarah Ornst Bloomquist, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Mom's Mental Health Initiative, which we launched in March of 2016. I am a mother of 2. I have a 16-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I also have 2 dogs who are they're rescues. They're neurotic rescues. So they just join in on the whole mental health, smorgasbord that goes on in our house.
Yeah.
And who I was before I was a mom, I was way more uptight. And you want to go that route? Way more uptight and intense and controlling. I worked just in the helping professions, life coaching, worked in nonprofit programs, in advocacy. I just kind of enjoyed meeting friends at coffee shops and taking hikes and play soccer. I do that now. I did that before I had a baby. Babies. Took a while to get back into it after I had babies. But, that's me.
I absolutely love what you're doing with Mom's Mental Health Initiative. That is sort of how we got connected. There was a social media post that I interacted with, and I'm so glad that I did because I've got to learn more about you and what you guys are doing, and we'll definitely get into that. I want to focus a little bit on your parenting journey. Was being a parent something that was always a priority for you?
I wouldn't say it was always a priority. I mean, I think I saw it in my future, but I wasn't, looking at baby registries before I even knew I was pregnant. I wasn't, it was just kind of like when the desire outweighed the fear then of having a child, then we started to try, and it didn't take long. And there's other factors like health insurance and having coverage and all that, but I wouldn't say my main motivation in life was to be a parent. Like, I remember a friend when we were camp counselors saying, like, I'm just built to be a mom. Like, that's just what I'm meant to do and be. And I was like, I do not identify with that.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I waffled a lot in my young adult years between I want to do this mom thing to I could take it or leave it. So you had 2 kids who are now old enough to where you are getting to explore parts of yourself that you haven't been able to for a while. But way back then, when they were little and brand new, what was that transition into parenting like for you?
Yeah, for me, I had postpartum depression and anxiety issues. So that was like the first part of my transition, and it was awful and horrible. And we can talk more about that later, but there was a really awful way to walk into parenthood. And then, it's very all-consuming when they're little. And I think with one, my kids are about 4.5 years apart. And so I just had one, and it was definitely doable. I think the hard part for me was like not having choice on my time, like losing, like, oh, I just want to lay down for a minute, or I want to do this. Like you lose choice in what you want. It's just very consuming. And then the second came along, and I mean, that's your life. That's everything. And it's not a complaint, you just kind of surrender to that. And there are many seasons of life that go on. But like I remember I was in a mom's club. We'd all meet with our little kids. And then when school started, and those of us who had kids going to start school, all the moms like would meet for coffee in the morning. And there's a bunch of us who were like, we can't wait to be part of that crew where we can meet for coffee in the morning. Like, it's like still I had little ones at home. Like I sent my older one to school, but I still had another one. And just like the longing to be able to be with your peers and not have children around. And so it's a lot. It's like I said, it's all consuming. I had an aunt say, I just finally just surrendered to it. And when you can accept that that's what this is right now, it makes it a lot easier. But I mean, it's exhausting.
I do. I want to like highlight when you added on the end that that's what it's like right now, or that's what it's like. And like, it is constantly evolving and it's constantly changing. And when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to see that. But yeah, like that longing to almost like graduate to the next step, like graduate to the next mom's group.
Right.
I can relate to that. And a lot of our listeners, it's interesting. A lot of our listeners are in the thick of things, brand new, going through PMADS, or are sort of like just trying to figure themselves out after just having a baby. And then we have a big group of listeners who are where you're at now and going back and like, oh yeah, I did feel that way. And oh yeah, that makes so much more sense. But keeping in mind, like, this is a season. Yeah. It's always a season. Everything is a season. Thinking back to your season of experiencing PMADS, I don't even know how I want to begin with that. Did you have an understanding of what perinatal mood and anxiety disorders were before you experienced them?
Not really. I had a history already of mental health challenges, like some anxiety and depression, very episodic, like just episodes of it when I went off to college and things like that. And then I didn't really expect anything to happen when I was going to have a baby. Like, I wanted to have my baby. I planned this. I kind of knew a little bit about postpartum depression, like heard about Brooke Shields.
Yeah.
For those of us of a certain age know who that is.
I know who Brooke Shields is. Come on.
But no, and there was no discussion about it with my doctor. Like, there's just no mental health history taken, nothing. And my mom said, well, I was a little worried that it might happen, but I didn't want to say anything. And I'm like, I wish you would have, but at the same time, I don't know if I would have listened to it anyways.
Right.
But yeah, I had the risk factors. And I had an older sibling, a half sibling, who went through it years ago. I mean, I was a little kid. So that was another risk factor right there. But I didn't really, our age difference was so much that I didn't really know much about it and wasn't really discussed. I was very blindsided.
Yeah, which I think a lot of parents are, because things are shifting, but it's not talked about. And it wasn't talked about. What were before I even get to that, how did it sort of manifest for you? What did it look like or feel like?
Looking back, I had anxiety in my pregnancy, which some of it was probably common worries. I think some of it was obsessing a little bit more about what kind of mom I would be. Would my baby like me? Like just this underlying worry and angst. But with my first, I mean, it was an acute onset. He came out and I had disturbing thoughts. I was numb. Every time they brought him to me to eat, I would like shake with a panic attack. I was it very much hijacked me. And like the anxiety was a bit paralyzing. I did ask my doctor in the hospital. I said, I think I might need some medication. I have been on medication in the past, so I wasn't against taking meds. And I had a friend who started some while she was pregnant. And so he was like, okay, well, what have you taken? And then he like gave me the lowest dose, which is not a therapeutic dose for me. And he's like, don't want to start worrying now because when they're teenagers, you got to deal with. And I was like, I can't hear that right now. Like, don't talk to me about when they're teenagers. Like, I can barely like grasp the concept that I have a baby right now.
Yeah.
You know? And they're like, he was jaundiced, so we had to stay a few extra hours. And I was like, do we need to stay overnight? I can stay longer. It's fine. Like, I didn't want to go home. Nothing. And so when we got home, he came 3 weeks early, so we weren't fully prepared. And he had to have this Billy blanket that they delivered to us to put on him at night because of his jaundice. And they told us how to put it on wrong, and it made him uncomfortable, and he didn't sleep at all. And then, like, I'm trying to breastfeed, and it was just awful. And meanwhile, like, I'm dealing with anxiety, and the anxiety was manifesting very physically. So I was vomiting with anxiety, diarrhea, couldn't eat. If I rested, I'd wake up with a panic attack. There's a lot of panic attacks, just burning sensation that came over me, and crying, of course, crying all the time, and feeling very trapped. Like, I can't get out of this. Like, I can't go back. I'm stuck with this baby. I mean, I loved him. Like, there was no doubt about that. But just feeling like, did I make a mistake? Should I not have done this? Like, oh my gosh. And my parents were finally able to come after a few days and kind of help me. And, you know, like, my breast milk wasn't coming in. I just wanted to do formula, but no one would say, oh, that's okay. Like, the pressure to breastfeed. And my doctor was like, oh, I'll support whatever you want. I'm like, no, tell me what to do. Like,
give me some direction.
Yeah, like, the baby was dropping weight, so they're having me do, like, the breast pump, putting him on my breast with a tube connected to formula. And it was like, and you're supposed to sleep then. So, you know, it's like, and you start it from when they start feeding, not when they end, right? The time frame from when they need to eat next. And I'm like, I'm not sleeping. I had a aunt who was a pediatrician, and I was on the phone with her all the time. And she was like, Sarah, just go to formula. It's okay. Your baby will be okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, thank you, because I need other people to help feed him. I can't do this. But I ended up, after my parents left, like contacting my doctor. My doctor was out. He was sick. It was like flu season. But going back, I had to take my son back up to the hospital to get his bilirubin checked a couple times, and was in the waiting room with my head on my husband's lap. And the nurse came to get the baby, and I was like, can you please get my doctor? Because something isn't right. Something's just not right. And she looked like a deer in headlights. And then she left. And then she came back, and she's like, I spoke to the doctor, and he just wants you to drink more water, take some Tylenol.
Oh my gosh.
No, like, what's not right? But I didn't have the language to tell them what wasn't right. You know, I didn't have the language to describe what was going on. Just like, this was, I'm not functioning. I am not functioning well here at all. So after like around 3 weeks, my parents had left. Like, they didn't live near us, and like frantically calling my doctor, you know, and I connected to the therapist. They have a therapist that they recommend, but she was out with pneumonia. It was February, so like everyone was sick. And so my doctor's assistant said, are you having thoughts of harm toward yourself or another? And I was like, no, maybe, kind of. And like, I was just having intrusive thoughts, like these dark thoughts of like throwing my baby down the stairs, knowing I wouldn't do it. I'm like, I'm not premeditated. I'm not going to do this, but I didn't trust myself. I would tell my husband, like, you need to take the baby. I'm having weird thoughts. But like, who wants to admit that? And so then she was like, okay, I want you to go to the crisis center. So then I'm like, okay, I'll go to the crisis center. And one of the reasons why I was so willing to go was because another mom that I heard of through a friend told me that she had gone at 6 months postpartum for depression. I'm like, oh, this lady went, I'll go. And so I just talked to the social worker there, and then she came back. She's like, I talked to the psych, and he wants you to increase your medication, and we're going to have this person call you. That was basically it. Like, I didn't see the psych. And I'm like, so I'm supposed to increase my meds without a script? Like, you're not giving me?
Yeah.
So then I'm standing there in the lobby at the crisis center, like, you can go home now. And I'm like, I don't want to go home. I want to stay. Like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so the social worker's like, could you stay with somebody? And so I stayed with my in-laws, and my husband kept the baby for the night. And then the next day, my doctor's assistant, because he was still sick, and so she called my primary and said, Sarah's coming in for this. She's going to need medication, blah, blah, blah. Like, just, and so I got that appointment right away. And then they had someone named Birdie call me, and I'm sure you know who Birdie might be from.
I don't.
You don't? Okay, so
No.
Birdie, at the time, I think she was president of Postpartum Support International.
Ah, okay.
But she lived where I lived in Indianapolis. And so she called me, and she just said, you know, what some people do is they take meds, you know, and kind of gave me a rundown, not telling me what to do, but just like what other people have done.
Yeah.
And then she's like, come to my support group tomorrow or Thursday or something, whatever day it was. So I went to my primary, and he was like, first had to make sure I wasn't a drug addict, like asking for this medication. And then he's like, I think you have fibromyalgia. And I'm like, I'm 3 weeks postpartum. Like, I'm not sleeping. I'm achy. Like,
yeah.
But he prescribed the stuff that I needed to help. And then I had an SSRI, but that takes a long time to kick in,
Yes.
and it was starting to kick in a little bit, and then he did give me the benzos that I took scheduled to help combat the panic attacks. And so then my mom was able to come back and be with me for a week, and my dad was elderly and he couldn't really be by himself, and they were spent a few months in Florida. So my oldest sister went and stayed with him for a while so my mom could come back, and then she took me and my son back to where they were, because I needed to be with somebody. And Birdie did connect me to a psych NP who was familiar with this, so I got to meet with her, and she was regulating my meds, and then she's like, you can call me. And then I don't think I saw the therapist, but I talked to her on the phone, and she's like, you feel free to call me while you're down there. And I did, and I went through some other, met with some counselors and some spiritual advisors down there. And so I was with my parents for about 2.5 weeks and slowly started to feel better. And my husband came, and then I was able to go back home. And it took like a good year to really feel back to normal, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But it was like just this prolonged process where I wasn't being heard. And I felt like I was screaming, help me, but people weren't taking the time to say, okay, help you with what? Let's figure out what's going on here. And meanwhile, I have, a 2-week-old, a 3-week-old who I love, and it pains me to think about even now that I was feeling that way when he was a little baby.
Yeah.
But and one provider's like, did you even want children?
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And so I called my brother, and I'm crying, and he's like, yes, you wanted children.
Yeah.
Putting a kibosh on that. I mean, it just the messaging did not help. And then I had it with my daughter, but it was very different. So with my daughter, I had everything in place. I was on meds. I had a psychiatrist. I had a therapist. My OB was fantastic. I mean, he took all these notes on my prior experience, and my pregnancy was good. I just didn't have that anxiety. And when I had her, it went well. And yeah, and I had a specific plan. And I was like, first, I know things can happen during my labor and delivery, so I'm not going to be so specific. I cannot have, this done, and it has to be like this. I understand. You just don't know what you're going to get when you're going to labor.
Yeah.
But I was like, I want my baby put on me right away, because I don't think I got that with my son. And I had a very strict postpartum plan. And my postpartum plan was my baby will go to the nursery all night. And my doctor will prescribe a sleeping pill. And so my doctor and my psych, they're all in cahoots together. They all kind of work together on that. And I was like, I need my full night's sleep. Both nights, no ifs, ands, or buts. And I mean, I wrote this down, and I was also working at a pregnancy center, teaching some childbirth classes, and my one nurse is like, well, if you don't, if you send the baby to the nursery, it could affect your milk. And I'm like, no, stop second guessing me. What does it take for me to be listened to? I know myself. I know my body. And I was like, I know it could affect my milk, but that's the risk I'm going to take. Because I have to have this sleep in order to be able to function. And my OB was like, your milk will be fine. Send the baby to the nursery. It just,
Yeah.
I I had full support of my medical team. But when I got home, it was almost like a PTSD, like your cells kind of remember, and the anxiety started hitting.
Yeah.
And so I got a hold of my psychiatrist, and I think she was gone. So there was another psychiatrist, and they prescribed me an additional med that always just works very fast for me. And she was like, "Are you having intrusive thoughts?" I'm like, "Maybe a little bit." She goes, "I think a lot of moms do." And that was like really nice for her to say in here.
Yeah.
So then I felt good, like a week after, was bonded with my baby, like even in pregnancy and all of that. But then after a couple months, I started to get a little jittery and a little off. And what was happening was my two meds were having like an interaction. And so my psych was like, well, maybe we just don't need that one anymore. Like, you're doing well. But I did need it. I just needed it with a different med. Different med.
Yeah.
And so I started slowly falling into depression. And it was a time when the Newtown shooting happened at the schools in Connecticut. And like that triggered me so badly. And then I was supposed to start back at work, and I just called my boss from the parking lot at Target crying. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't come in. And so then I was going through all that again. So then I had to like figure out meds. And so she switched me back to my old med that I used to be on. And she's like, well, we'll try this and we'll try that. And could not take care of my baby. Like, so my husband was with our 4-year-old. I went and stayed with my parents. They helped with the baby. Like, I couldn't handle hearing her cry without like going into panic, like picking her up. I just, I was so fully bonded with this baby. And then all of a sudden, like, I couldn't handle her. And I finally said, can I go stay with my sister? Because they're empty nesters. And she had been through it. And I'm like, I need to be away. And that's what I did for 3 days while they adjusted my medications and tried to figure out. And then I was able, I started to get better a lot faster once they got the medication correct. And of course, I, dealing with a therapist and all that at the same time. But I'm like on the floor of the bathroom crying, and my 82-year-old dad is sitting next to me while he's talking to my therapist. Like,
yeah, that's a dynamic you don't expect, for sure. Well, and so much of what you have shared about your story resonates with me personally. And this is your time and this is your story, but something that I think, we are talking more and more about PMADS in general, and that's obviously like the focus of this podcast. But I think what doesn't get talked about enough is the physical side of mental health disorders. And hearing you talk about how physically sick you were, like, that was me. That was the throwing up, the not being able to eat, the not being able to sleep because you wake up in a cold sweat, panicking, heart racing, like. And I think when you aren't familiar with, and even if you are, even if you have a history of mental health, you still are like, what is happening to me? Yeah. What is this?
Right.
And you were, especially with your first pregnancy and delivery, like, you were completely disregarded. They did not listen. No one was listening to you. And that resonates with me as well. And I think it resonates with a lot of new moms. Like, we're often told, like, well, you're not drinking enough water, you're not getting enough rest, this, that, and the other thing. And you're like, no, something is wrong. Something is very wrong. And then what I heard you say in both circumstances is that time is what eventually got you through it. And while that's really hard for a lot of new parents to hear, it also is the truest fact and the most common thread with all of us. And no shame in the med game. but it sucks having to be like, well, okay, let's try this. This didn't work. Okay, let's try this. This didn't work. So time is our enemy and our friend in this process. But you are proof that it does get better. It does get better.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you had a really great support system.
I mean, my family was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, and it saddens me how many people don't have that support from their family.
Yeah.
Or I had support from my employer. Like, people don't get that. We treat new parents so badly.
Yes. That we talk about the mental health crisis, and then obviously, like, you and I are focused very primarily on maternal mental health and perinatal mental health, but like just support in general for families, what an impact that would make on the outcomes of these mental health struggles. Having better family leave, having support and understanding in terms of just mental health disorders in general, and seeking help and resources for getting the help. And it's a mess. It's a whole big mess. But you're trying to change that. Can you talk to me a little bit about, actually, before we even get to that, you mentioned talking to someone from Postpartum Support International, which is like the leading go-to for postpartum mental health disorders. I did not know it existed until after I had my second child and I was very, very sick. So did you know of any resources, or were you,
No.
it sounds like you were just begging for...
I didn't know any resources. And like, I was watching, I think I was like pumping milk and watching Tyra Banks, and they had like 3 guests who were dealing with postpartum depression. And I was like, I remember that, like, oh, wow. And then I knew about Brooke Shields. So my mom bought me the book, and it was like racing to the end of the book. When do you get better? When did she get better? She, like, all I want to know is, will I get better, and when will I get better? And every single day you're questioning yourself multiple times a day. Will I feel better? Am I feeling better? Am I feeling better now? Will I get better? And that's all I heard. I had no idea about PSI. But luckily I was in the state and the city where one of the president of PSI was living. And but no.
So
this was 16 years ago.
Still, though, I know that it seems like such a long time ago. I might be in denial about that, though. 16 years ago, I was in college, but I still feel like I'm 16 years old. So
I know.
Yeah.
I'm wondering when do you ever feel like an adult?
Does that ever? I literally am still like, where is the adult in the room? Oh, it's me. Oh, crap. That's me. Okay.
Right.
But yeah, 16 years really, in the grand scheme of things, is not that long ago. And to know that then you weren't aware of resources, and today there are still people that are like, that think that there's something seriously wrong with them alone, and that they're alone because they don't know. They don't know about PSI. They don't know about Mom's Mental Health Initiative. They don't know about the Blue Dot Project. So this is what we're out here trying to talk about. So I guess jumping ahead, like, how you said you used to work a lot in advocacy work and nonprofit. When did the shift begin into perinatal mental health?
Well, I was working in crisis pregnancy, and there was an organization called Postpartum Progress that was national, and they had an event called Climb Out of the Darkness. So this was before PSI.
PSI is the climb. Yep.
So, and by then I was already in recovery. I'd recovered, and somebody in my area was heading up a Climb Out of Darkness team. So Climb Out of Darkness was a day dedicated to, you'd hike It was on the longest day of the year, and it was to raise, money and funds for Postpartum Progress for this organization. And so she was doing a climb, and I was like, I'm joining on. And a few other ladies joined on, just discovered it through some Facebook group. And so then we became friends, and we started those Facebook group for all of us, so we could just stay connected and meet. And then she and I would talk, and she's like, I think we need more advocacy work done. And is that something you think you would like to head up a bit? I was like, yeah, definitely. And then honestly, it's such a blur. I don't know how we got to the point of starting MMHI, but we were kind of working on this plan of what we wanted to do. And we got in touch with she was the executive director of one of the birth hospitals here. And she's really passionate about mental health. And she had some, I believe, community funds available because they were going to be going through like a merger soon. And so she's like, I like to see this happen, and here's some money to help jumpstart that. And so we're sitting here trying to figure out this organization we want to start. And then my co-founder was pregnant during that. I had recently lost my mother. And my father was in a nursing home, and then she had her baby, and then it was her second, and in 6 weeks she started going through postpartum anxiety. So we're building this organization during all of this.
Yeah.
And she, her baby was colicky and liked to be in a baby carrier, and she just was not comfortable with the baby carrier. So we would work on the computer and website stuff and all that. And I'm holding her baby in the baby carrier, and so much of it's a blur. And then we launched, and there was a newspaper article that came out in the Sunday Journal about postpartum depression, and my old employer connected this reporter to me because they were looking for information on that, and he ended up doing the story on me.
Wow.
And we were like, well, we better get launched when this comes out because he's going to mention this organization, right? So that's how we launched. And it was a labor of love for many, many years.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we wanted to improve access to evidence-based treatment and peer support. We just felt it was so hard to get the right help. So hard. So what could we do to help make that easier? And one of that was finding providers that understood perinatal mental health disorders and understood the need to get someone seen urgently. And we created a preferred provider list, and so people could reach out to us and we could make warm handoffs. And then we had an online peer support group for perinatal people struggling through one of these conditions. And this was mostly southeastern Wisconsin. So yeah, that's really how it ignited.
It kind of was born in a storm a little bit.
It was, yeah. I mean, I think anything around these conditions is a perfect storm. I think when you have your baby, it's a perfect storm for one of these conditions to develop. There's so many factors, and then here, yeah, it was definitely born out of a storm. I mean, my dad died then a year into launching MMHI, and I was helping some of the care with him. And so a lot of grief, dealing with a lot of grief, managing my children's grief. And so wasn't easy. That's why a lot of it is a blur.
Yeah, I can imagine. So talk to me about talk to me about what MMHI is up to today.
Yeah.
When I stumbled upon you, you guys were looking for survivor stories, and that's just one thing that you're doing. But talk to me about your outreach and what you're doing these days.
So we have 3 pillars that we focus on in helping navigate these conditions, helping people navigate these conditions. And one is information sharing. And so this really incorporates us coming to the community, to public health, to healthcare system, making sure people have a basic understanding of these conditions, but also knowing the patient perspective, knowing the parent perspective. What does it look like? What do they need? How do you approach this? We also do a lot of social media work. So making sure accurate information is being shared, making sure that some of the work around policy, everything is being shared. So there's like different facets of the social media. And, we do consulting, like helping, do some work with the Department of Health Services with their maternal child department, working with different local and tribal health departments on their perinatal mental health screening objectives, working a little bit with WIC on their screening around perinatal mental health. So a lot of that type of work is in that information sharing, as we just saw so much misinformation out there. And you make a post and you get, oh, well, I tried this and it was great for me. And I'm sorry. I think that I'm not trying to put down essential oils, but for some people, essential oil isn't going to cut it.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many friends reached out and they're like, have you tried peppermint oil for your nausea and lavender for your insomnia? And I'm like, I don't think that there is an oil in existence that can solve what I'm going through. I love essential oils.
And there's a role. And we have different tools, but certain tools sometimes need to come before so we can access our other tools.
Yes.
And, so that's one, that information sharing and making sure it's accurate. And then we have our resource brokering. So we continually build our network of preferred providers. So psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, MDs, primary doctors, psych NPs, who we screen and vet to make sure that they are trustworthy, that they understand these conditions, they know how to treat them, and they understand the urgency of somebody getting treatment. And whether they can't see them, they make a qualified referral or refer back to us. We really work hard to make sure people are getting access to care quickly. Because by the time someone actually reaches out for help, they're in a bad place. It's rare for us to be like, oh, I'm feeling a twinge of anxiety, I should reach out. I mean, it's like a slow build, and then all of a sudden it's just full blown in your face. And so we're able to connect, or people can go on our website and they can filter themselves for a provider. And then we do peer support. So our resource brokering is a form of peer support. When people reach out to us, it's okay, let's figure out what next steps you need. You are not alone. Yes, I struggled with that too when I was going through it. But, what works for me or what works for some moms is connecting with a therapist. Have you spoken to your doctor? Okay, this is what I recommend asking your doctor. So allow peer support that way. And then we have an online peer support group called Circle of Hope that you can only be added by an admin. And then there's no medical advice. There's no diagnosing. It's really just that peer support. It's monitored. But it's, I have these meds in my hand and I'm scared to take them. And someone might respond like, I was too, but I'm so glad I did. And it just a lot of great, it's amazing, like the power of peer support, how having somebody else who gets it and knows what you're going through and seeing others get better and just being like, oh, thank you, I'm so glad I'm not the only one. It's another evidence-based treatment, and it can help people stick with their treatment plan, not give up hope. Because the one thing that these conditions do is they try to destroy hope.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to see an ounce of hope. You feel lost to yourself, and they attack the core of what, a core of your identity and being a parent. And so having others help provide that hope and see that hope for you is crucial to your recovery.
Absolutely. And that's what we're all about. That's what Quiet Connection is all about. That whole you are not alone thing, because you feel completely alone. You feel completely alone, and like you're the only person in the world, but you're not. And there is hope. So you're doing so much. You're doing so much in the world of perinatal mental health. Like you said, the pillars of MMH. I can't even say it. MMHI. Oh, it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
You're doing so much. This is a big question. What do you think still needs to change? Or if we get super specific, what would be like your top 3 big things that need to change and need to happen now in the world of perinatal mental health?
Well, I mean, this really comes down to a systems level issue.
Yep.
We are full of silos in our healthcare system, mental and physical healthcare separated. There's a lack of consistency in care around perinatal mental health. So you just don't know like what you're going to get when you go to one doctor versus another. And we look at women of color who are even more marginalized when it comes to women's health, and they receive less screening and less access to care and have a higher rate of pregnancy-related deaths and postpartum depression and anxiety. So, we have the siloed system of healthcare, and it's tragic how backed up the system is when you're trying to find help. And insurance is a big problem. At least in the state of Wisconsin, we don't have Medicaid expansion, so you can lose your benefits at 2 months postpartum.
Gosh.
And we know that the leading cause of death, pregnancy-related deaths, has to do with mental health, suicide and overdose, which often happen 7, 8, 9 months postpartum. And then you're also dealing, even with private health care, trying to find a provider that takes your insurance, and then the co-pays. I mean, insurance is a massive factor in this.
Yes.
I mean, some people will not like me saying this, but I mean, universal health care would have such a role in helping the maternal mental health crisis.
Yeah.
So definitely we're looking at the systems, and we need to look at the underlying systems we have maternal care deserts. We have lack of housing issues. Rural communities don't have the support they need. Transportation issues, like finding transportation to get racism. There's so much there that puts up barriers to getting the care you need. Another 3 things is it would be great if providers were well knowledge,
right?
A term,
or
have
trained
knowledge about these things, about perinatal mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, even psychiatrists, like some of them are like, I'm not dealing with a pregnant patient. Like, And we have a psychiatric access program in Wisconsin called the Periscope Project. So any provider can call and in real time get consultation on psychiatric medication and substance use disorder medication for a pregnant and postpartum person. We just need people to use it. Those type of things, like a lot more peer support opportunities would help, especially in those desert areas with care, having peer support. We need a system of follow-up care. We need to not just screen. We need to be screening correctly. We need to be screening frequently. We need to be addressing not just depression, but anxiety and everything that goes with it. We need to be getting mental health history. We need to talk about these conditions so people recognize what's happening around PTSD or OCD, all of that. And then the follow-up care needs to be the systems, the people within the healthcare systems need to work together to ensure that people are not falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
Because these conditions they hinder you from being able to get care. The nature of these conditions, because they lie to you, they tell you you won't get better, you lack hope, they physically manifest the exhaustion. So all the stuff that goes into advocating for yourself is really hard when you are barely functioning because of your mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need navigators that help people navigate.
Navigators, advocates, especially for people who don't have that solid support system like you had or like I had. You need someone in your corner. Yeah, they're huge things. I know it's such a big question. It's a question I've asked other providers before, and it's like, oh boy.
How much time do we have?
Right?
We talk about a
Exactly.
lot of different things.
Yes. But you hit on some huge ones. I think a lot of what you have said has been so important because, one, you have lived experience and you are at a place now where you're in the system. You are in this world. You're in this realm. So you can see it from a personal perspective and you can also see it from a professional perspective. And I think that that's going to be really helpful for a lot of my listeners. And a thing that you said that is also something that was repeated to me when I was in treatment is that hope, because it does rob you of hope. Like, we'll hold it for you. Mm-hmm. Sarah will hold it for you. I will hold it for you. We will hold it for you until you can see it again, because it will come back.
Right.
It will come back. Sarah, what do you hope my listeners take away from your story?
That is a very good question. From my story of my perinatal mental health story?
Your whole story, just you, the story of Sarah.
The story of Sarah. Oh my. Well, I think what I would like listeners to take away, you don't need perfection to be a good parent. You don't need follow the formulas that you think exist to be a parent or to seek recovery from your conditions, and that your voice matters and you know yourself, and to not give into the power differential between the healthcare system and the patient, that you are a partner in the journey of having your child with your healthcare providers. And that is not an easy thing to do. I mean, you definitely feel like you don't have a voice, and there's a lack of informed consent. Mm-hmm. And more people need to be demanding information and stepping up and saying, this is what I need, and having an advocate. I think everyone should have a doula if you can.
That's like the theme of this season. I get a doula, find a doula.
Yeah.
We're all about the doulas.
Like my doula, she's just like, you can ask this and you can ask that. And if you're not wanting this right now, you can speak up and say that, like giving me choice and not telling me what to do, but saying, here's your options.
Yeah.
And then explaining them. And I didn't have certain interventions because my doula empowered me to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if you can get a doula, which isn't always easy.
No, that's another thing we need to change, is access to
have
doulas.
Insurance cover doula care.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
I want to thank you wholeheartedly for meeting with me, for sharing your story, for creating this space. This will be linked in the show notes, but if my listeners want to find you and want to find Mom's Mental Health Initiative, where should they look?
Just Google us. Mom's Mental Health Initiative. We're a virtual organization, so you can easily go on our website and contact us. We respond within 24 to 48 hours. You can go on social media, contact us via social media. Our website is really a tool as well. Like if you're like, I don't know if I have depression or not, like some of the information on there might help you get a better idea of what's going on, what you're feeling, what's the next step. And you can always just reach out to us anytime.
I will say that you guys are very responsive on social media, which is great. If I react to a post or a story, someone is reacting back or responding. So I'm thankful that I found you, and I'm thankful to have the opportunity to sort of spread the word about you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you for just spreading the word and making this a focal point in your work. We need that.
Sarah, thank you for being an incredible advocate and support in the perinatal mental health field. Your story highlights the unfortunate truth that so many of us have faced. You have to speak up and do it loudly in order to get the help you need. But there is help and there is hope, and you are proof of that. Listeners, be sure to check out Mom's Mental Health Initiative through their website or social media to learn more. You can keep up with us on Quiet Connection by following us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Quiet Connection Podcast. You can help our community grow by leaving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider sharing our episodes on social media. To share your personal journey, you can contact us through our website at quietconnectionpodcast.com or by email at quietconnectionppmh@gmail.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.